have ever spent hours upon hours dealing with airport traffic and crazy weather and worse road traffic and put up with all of it just to finally get home and smell those fresh baked holiday cookies that your abuelita makes, and hear your uncle arguing politics in the other room, and see your cousin's kids running around underfoot, and think it was all worth it just to be home, then you understand what it means to be human. As humans, we do things that are unpredictable and illogical. We do things that simply do not make sense because we do them because of how it makes us feel. It's part of what sets us apart as a different animal. We have traditions and social norms, things that simply don't make sense, but we do them every year anyway. Think about the fact of the Marlins can't win unless I wear my lucky socks. We do things over and over and over because of how it makes us feel, and we avoid things because of how it makes us feel when we have irrational fears, but then we'll try those same things and try to overcome them just because we want to know if we can do it. We are always changing and always contradicting ourselves because we're continuously learning. We're an evolving species, so we're always taking in new information and processing that. I love this quote from Malcolm Gladwell, that if you don't contradict yourself on a regular basis, then you're not thinking. It's also a great justification for my job, by the way. Being a futurist in the technology space, I have to contradict myself on a regular basis because I'm always taking in new information, continuously evaluating that, and looking at what is new. As a human species, we are just driven by relationships. Everything we do is relationship-centric. We do things in groups. There's a reason we are here together in person. It's great to be at an event in person. It's not primarily virtual. We will go out of our way to go to sporting events in person. We will have exercise classes. We'll sweat together in person. We'll spend more time and more money for worse seats just to do an event together with other people because we like the camaraderie of it. It drives who we are, and we enjoy the experience of it, not just viewing something at home alone, but doing it with other people and having that experience. I think this quote says it best from Simon Sinek: humans are social animals. We are at our best when we get to do things with others who appreciate and enjoy what we enjoy. It is what keeps us human. It is why we are different. It is our utter humanity. And when we look at technology, it helps us to keep this in mind because the technology that works best is the technology that allows us to have that human connection. This is not a new concept. If you think about very early technology, take the telephone, for instance. 1876, Alexander Graham Bell performed the first recorded phone call. Brand new technology, something that's never been done before, and the first words ever spoken on this new technology: "Mr. Watson, come here. I want to see you." We use this new cutting-edge technology to get people together, to connect people, to facilitate connection. And if you think about switchboard operators, that's the perfect example of connection. Say, "Hold on while I connect you," and they would literally take a cord and plug it into a port to connect you to another person. So how does that apply to work when, over the last few years in particular, we have been disconnected? Since we are driven by connection, it's been very challenging for a lot of people who are thrust into this remote work experience over the last few years who had never done it before. Now, many of us here are in the IT space. We were knowledge workers, IT workers. A lot of us found that our jobs and our work could be done remotely, or some element of mixed hybrid work. But that doesn't work so well when you apply it to the connections that you have with your colleagues and your partners and your customers. That is much harder to facilitate when you are home or when you are remote, when you are disconnected. And because of that, we see frustration with that over and over again. And you have different organizations like the Harvard Business Review and Forbes and research organizations. You have psychology organizations. You have HR organizations that are all looking at the same problem. How do I deal with a disconnected workforce? Because ultimately that is impacting my productivity, that is impacting their health, it is impacting the overall camaraderie of the company as a whole, it's impacting my sales. How do I deal with that disconnection? Because it's not how humans operate. So this raises a challenge statement. It's probably a good point to tell you who I am. My name is Elizabeth Bieniek. I am an internal startup founder at Cisco. It is one of the coolest jobs on the planet. My job is focused on disruptive innovation. Two things I love, innovation and disruption. My purpose of our team is to look at not what is happening already and how do we make small jumps from that, but look at the industry and the world around us and say, what is changing? What is changing in the technology? What is changing the way people operate? What is changing in the world around us? And how do we react to that so that we can build things that will disrupt the technology and the process that we're doing today and ultimately make it better? This caused me to look, about 7 years ago, I started out on this challenge to say, how could the AR/VR space in particular disrupt the future of collaboration and security technologies, which is the group I work in? So I wanted to dig deep into AR/VR and understand that market, but before I did that, I needed to start with not the technology, but the people. Despite being in a CTO organization, I don't think of myself in the technology business, I think of myself in the people business. So I had to look and see, how do people communicate? When people just come together in a room and they share and they interact, what do? And since the beginning of time, we have always interacted the same way. It's how tribal customs are passed down. It's how we learn and share in things as early as preschool, where we have circle time. Kids will sit in a circle and learn from their teacher. They'll do show and tell. It's something we do at work. We gather around a presenter. It's something we do after work. We gather around somebody telling a story over a beer. We have the opportunity for someone to speak and share and show an object and laugh and join together, and that is how we interact. So how do you get to that experience that enriches that interaction, that connection? How do you get there? And so much of that interaction is nonverbal. This is my eldest when she was a baby, and aside from being able to show baby pictures to a captive audience, there is a point I have here of you can tell so much from someone's expression of what they are feeling. If you have ever tried to give a food to a small child who did not like it, it does not matter that they have not mastered the English language. You have a pretty clear understanding from their facial reactions alone. They don't like it. We convey so much just by our facial expressions. Gestures. I am Italian, if you can't tell already. I have to talk with my hands as much as I talk with my face. It's part of communication. It's part of how we interact. Body language says so much, whether you're interested or disengaged. There's a study done in 1967, Professor Albert Morabian. If you don't know him by name, I am sure you have seen this study in some capacity. His findings concluded that only 7% of what we say is what comes across in the communication. Only 7% is the words. Everything else is all that nonverbal. Most of it is body language, gestures, all those interactions. The one that really surprised me was the 38% from tone of voice. There's two examples I can think of that really make that come home. If you've ever been in an airport or a busy forum and you've heard a parent yelling at a child in a language you did not speak, you don't need to know a word of what they're saying. You can tell just from their tone of voice, ooh, you're in trouble. Same thing, if I did this entire talk, completely monotone, with no expression, with no inflection of my voice, just spoke like this for the whole time, it would be an incredibly long 30 minutes for the both of us. So much goes into what we are saying, and most of that is really important, is not what is being said, is what is being not said. So focusing on all of that to understand how people interact is incredibly important when you're looking at disrupting collaboration. The reason this is because we, as a species, use intuition as part of how we make sense of the world around us. And this is something we do incredibly quickly. We have these amazing supercomputers we carry around with us all the time, and I'm not talking about your phone, I'm talking about what's between your ears. We are constantly processing every bit of information that we take in, and we are spitting out outputs that are phenomenally accurate a lot of times. We call it intuition, we call it gut instinct. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a whole book on this, Blink, The Power of Thinking Without Thinking. a lot of times we're able to judge something very quickly and be incredibly accurate that we don't even realize we're doing. When it comes to people, there was a study done by Willis and Todorov, two Princeton psychologists, that confirmed people take on average about 1/10 of a second to form an opinion of a new person just based on their face, just based on seeing them. That is incredibly quick. Yet what's really interesting, after prolonged interactions, usually those opinions didn't change. And oftentimes they ended up being correct assessments of whether or not these people would engage and interact. It is part of how speed dating, for instance, works, or speed networking. The fact that you can have a very small, thin slicing experience with somebody else and get a sense of who they are and how you will engage. And the reason intuition is important is because that ultimately leads us to trust. And trust is the foundation of pretty much everything in human communication. We're always trying to get to trust. It is the #1 quality that we're looking for in our relationships, be that business relationships, romantic relationships, social relationships. You want to get to trust. When we talk about our leaders, it is the #1 quality that people rank in a leader that they're looking for is credibility. They want to know, can I trust this individual? The idea of breaking bread with someone, the reason you go out to drinks with a colleague or with a customer is you are trying to get to that familial level of interaction that goes beyond just the surface, and you want to get to the point of trust, because the people that you work with, you want them to have your back, and you want them to know that you have theirs. Covey said it, the trust is the glue of life. It's the most essential ingredient in effective communication. It's a foundational principle that holds together all relationships. So if I bring that back to my original challenge statement, is it possible to get to that level of connection when you don't have proximity? We know how people interact when they are physically together. We understand that. But what happens when you are a distributed workforce? What happens when you're dealing with hybrid work, remote work? Can you get there? And how do you get there? So with that in mind, myself and my co-founder, we founded a project called Webex Hologram. We announced it last October. It is a 7 years in the making project. And what Webex Hologram is an end-to-end collaboration system that delivers photorealistic holograms in real time. The whole purpose of it is getting to connection when you don't have proximity. I understand end-to-end collaboration system with photorealistic holograms in real time is a mouthful. So let me do a short video to show you what I mean.
There's no replacement for in-person interaction, but we can feel like we're together, interacting with the same objects while being thousands of miles apart. Introducing Webex Hologram, the industry's first real-time holographic collaboration solution. This is a holographic meeting. It's a shared, intuitive interaction, allowing remote participants to experience the same immersive event. It's a transformative technology for designers, engineers, technicians, innovators, and more. This isn't some faraway vision for the future. It's available to a limited set of customers right now. The expectation of hybrid work has been elevated.
Thank you. We've spent several years building that because we felt it was important to tap into that element of connection. And to get there, what we wanted to focus on is not virtually replicating a meeting or an interaction, but how do you get to that feeling as if you are there with someone, that essence of being together. And there was one thing in particular that really brought this to life in our early stages of this when we realized we were onto something. It was, I think, phase 2 of the project several years ago. We did our first round of user testing, And at the time, it was just the experience, bare bones. There was no user interaction design, there was no frills to it, no call control. And I was watching this gentleman who was going through the user testing, and he was chatting away with this person that he'd never seen before. By the way, it's kind of hilarious to watch somebody do this when the other person is not there, and it's just an empty room. But having this real engaging dialogue with them, and then wrapped up the call, and then it was over. But we didn't yet have you're not hanging up. There's no button to push. Nothing's there. So I ended the call, and the person just poof, disappeared. And the user stood up and had this almost visible reaction, like, whoa, where'd he go? And that's when I realized two things. One, we needed some user interaction design. We have since added that, so we don't have that jarring experience. But two, more importantly, I realized that we had tapped into something that was phenomenally important. That feeling of being together with someone, which is very different from when you're doing a video conference. When you're just doing a call with someone, you're very aware that I'm here, you're there, and there's a pane of glass in between us. So you can have a great dialogue and a great interaction, but you are very aware that you are not together. With having a photorealistic holographic experience, you feel as if you are there with that person because they are there with you in your physical space, and you are interacting with them in the same way that you would if you would in person. I'll share two ways our customers are using this to solve their problems today. We started this well before the pandemic, but specifically in healthcare, our first customer was one that was struggling much more over the last few years of how do I train my staff and my customers on new medical devices when there are so many challenges with being there in person. They were facing all the restrictions of trying to travel and dealing with safety protocols that were different by different geographies. So they were faced with the problem of either going through all that hassle to get someone on site or trying to do it virtually, remotely, and trying to hold up an object on a screen and have how do you convey sizing? How do you convey how one part fits inside of another when you are dealing with a flat image? So it was two not ideal options, and they started using Webex Hologram as a way to train surgeons and surgical sales support staff on new medical devices to understand everything about how they worked. They could have an engaging, interactive dialogue with the actual physical object there as a hologram, and they were able to act the same way as they would in person in a fraction of the time. Another use case, if you are familiar with the whole world of F1 racing, our more vocal customer is McLaren Racing. They have been using Webex Hologram as a way to facilitate remote design review. The world of racing is something that's fabulously interesting. I became much more aware of it when we were dealing with this customer. It's not just the races that are fast. Everything in this industry is fast. When they're setting up for a new race site, it could be an entirely different country, an entirely different continent than where they were just a week before. And when they arrive on site to set up, it's usually only 10 days or so before the actual event, and they can come with nearly 30 tons of car parts by air, and another dozen tons or so by freight by sea. And then they assemble the car from scratch on site in 10 days or less. And this is something where exactness matters. It's not a car that's going to be on a show floor that you're just going to look at and say, oh, it looks cool. This is going to be hurtling around a track at hundreds of miles an hour with the most precious cargo, a human life inside. So it has to be exact. So when they were looking at making design reviews, they would, again, either have to deal with a last-minute change, a part didn't arrive, they had to tweak the design based on something different on the track. They might have to fly a tech from their design center on site, last minute, wait for the travel delays, and then interact. Or, same challenge as their medical devices company, they were trying to have this in-depth interaction over these multifaceted parts on a flat screen, on a video conference, or sending flat 2D files back and forth. Neither were ideal options. So they are looking at using Webex Hologram now as their design tool that they use on site to get that real-time feedback from their design warehouse to the track. It allows them to make faster decisions, And it works in an experience where everyone needs to agree on the experience. You need sign-off from everyone because, as I mentioned, human life is at stake. So these are important decisions. Ultimately, what we're trying to get to with Webex Hologram is facilitating that experience of connection. We're trying to go beyond just having a conversation, just using what we can with video interactions or 2D interactions. Those are great for certain use cases. But when it comes to really feeling together and coming together, we need something more. So what does this mean for the road ahead? The whole area of 3D interactions, I know there's a lot of AR, VR at this show. There's some cool things you can see on the expo floor. We are barely scratching the surface of what can be done in this space. I'm very excited to see that some of this come to life, but there's so much more that we can do. So as we look ahead, one thing I do know for sure is that hybrid work is not going away. I think there have been multiple speakers who have been quoted saying that there is no going back to how things used to be. Everyone is dealing with some element of remote work, hybrid work, and figuring out what that means for them. Companies are investing in it, employees are demanding it, and you're seeing these more flexible and new models emerging. With that, it's very interesting to see with the new generation that they are looking for some element of on-site interaction. Accenture did a study just last year on the height of the pandemic, and 74% of Gen Z respondents said they want to have face-to-face interaction with their colleagues on-site at work. This is very surprising, because this is the generation that does everything online. But you're also realizing this is the generation that didn't benefit from doing apprenticeship. They missed out on a couple years of those most formative years of learning how to operate in their new company, learning social business norms, having a mentor work with them on site. So we're seeing a push for, we won't be totally remote, but we won't be totally on site. So what is that hybrid gonna look like for us? One thing I know for absolutely sure is that the future is human. Every element that we are talking about when it comes to technology needs to be rooted in that human connection and that human interaction. Keeping that in mind, I think these 4 areas are where we will see a lot of advancement. Security. As we're moving to the digital nomad and this distributed workforce and the ability to work from anywhere, anytime, yet come on site, yet go off site, yet work from this country, security becomes very front and center. How do you enable these secure experiences that have flexibility for your employee force as well? And I think we'll see a lot of things with end-to-end encryption that we've seen over the last couple of years. You're going to see that sort of dichotomy of between security and convenience. How do I get the right balance for both? And it will not be a one-size-fits-all. I think each company is going to find out for their industry and for their workforce what this means to them. With that, interoperability becomes phenomenally important. We have moved away from the one-size-fits-all, you buy my solution, you get everything in there, it's a whole holistic package. Bring your own whatever to work. We went through bring your own device, we're now on this bring your own app to work. Your experience is much more consumer-driven and user-driven. And so the need to have things that are standards-based, the needs to have things that are interoperable, that you can take it from one experience to the next to the next. I don't want to have one experience over here in my 2D environment and a different one over here in my 3D environment, and one from home and one from when I'm in the office. It needs to translate from experience to experience. I do believe in augmented reality as a future. I think in the short term, augmented reality, more so than virtual, is going to be phenomenally impactful to the enterprise. I do think there are cases where virtual does make a lot of sense. It really depends on the interaction you're trying to create, the experience you're trying to create. Holograms, I'm obviously very bullish on holograms versus avatars. There's a certain amount of human interaction you can facilitate when it's very important to build that relationship and get to trust that you simply cannot do with a cartoon-like avatar. So depending on the scenario, there will be times where photorealistic holograms are crucial for the experience. And lastly, curated experiences, where you have conversational, this is where I think conversational AI will come in, the future of AI in general. I think we will have more and more curated experiences where you have access to AI intelligence in all formats. We talk a lot about this in 3D, but I actually think there's phenomenal opportunity in 2D that we have yet to tap into. Why can't I see immediately accessible in all of my applications a curated, AI-driven source of information that gives me more intel and augments my experience? In closing, I just want to say that humans are always relationship-driven, and when we talk about new tech and the future of tech, I love this topic, but it's something where we really can get derailed and think about, wow, this tech is cool, but forget who it's being used for and why. So when we're talking about technology adoption, it is always driven by the human's desire for relationships. So when it comes to hybrid work, if your solution is not working, if your approach is not working, set the technology aside for a minute and go back to relational tenets and see where you may have gotten off the track. Because once it is used to bring people together, it will succeed. I'd like to end with this quote. I think it's a fabulous quote from Sean Garrity. The technology you use impresses no one. It's the experience. The experience you create is everything. Thank you very much for your time. I know the expo floor is opening now. My name is Elizabeth Bieniek. I'm an internal startup founder at Cisco. You can find me on LinkedIn. I periodically write in our Webex blog. And if anyone would like to ask some questions or have a chat, I'll be down here. Thank you.